Welcome, everyone. Glad you could join us for another deep dive. Today, we're getting into Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck. It's quite a title, right? Our mission, like always, is to pull out the key ideas, link the stories, and some are really surprising to his principles, and basically give you the shortcut to understanding this whole philosophy. Expect a lively chat, some real insights, and honestly, quite a bit of humor as we explore how choosing what truly matters might be the key to a better life.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it, how the book just right off the bat pushes back against so much common thinking. Society's obsession with always being positive. Manson flips that completely. He argues that accepting negativity, maybe even leaning into certain kinds of suffering, well, that might actually be the way to real happiness and growth. It's a bold idea for sure, but the way he lays it out, it makes you think.
Okay, let's dive in then. We kick off with a really memorable character, Charles Bukowski. Now, this is probably not the first guy you'd think of for life advice. I mean, alcoholic, womanizer, chronic gambler. He called himself a deadbeat and sometimes a poet. But Manson uses him as the perfect starting point. Why? Because Bukowski's life was just decades of rejection. His writing, crude, visceral, pretty much dismissed by everyone. He spent years filing letters at a post office, just, making barely enough to cover booze and beds.
Just grinding away, right? Drinking alone, hammering out poems, sometimes waking up on the floor. Not exactly the picture of success.
Not at all. 30 years of this blurry cycle, alcohol, drugs, self-loathing, the works. Then, suddenly, at age 50, after what anyone would call a lifetime of failure, this small independent publisher actually takes a chance on him. His first real shot, probably his only shot. And Bukowski's response, it's classic. He writes back to the editor something like, "I have one of two choices, stay in the post office and go crazy, or stay out here and play at writer and starve. I have decided to starve." Signs the contract, whips out his first novel, Post Office, in like 3 weeks.
Wow, 3 weeks.
Yeah, and then goes on to publish 6 novels, hundreds of poems, sells millions of copies, totally defies expectations. Now, the typical story we tell ourselves is, he fought hard, never gave up, achieved his dream, the underdog wins. But here's the twist, the thing that really grabs you. His tombstone just says, don't try.
And that's where Manson pulls out the first principle, isn't it? Principle 1. True success isn't always about that relentless drive to win. Sometimes it comes from really accepting yourself, warts and all, even the parts you think are failures. It's about being honest, unflinchingly honest. Bukowski was just authentically Bukowski.
Yeah.
Comfortable with failure, writing about it, not trying to be someone else.
Exactly. And Manson contrasts that with our culture today, which he says is just drowning in these unrealistically positive expectations, Be happier, be healthier, be the best, smarter, faster, richer, sexier, more popular. It's endless. But the irony, he points out, is that focusing so much on the positive just constantly reminds you of what you're not, what you lack. It's like that saying, the smallest dog barks the loudest. If you're always dreaming about being rich, you're just reinforcing the fact that, well, you aren't right now.
Right. And that leads to what he calls the feedback loop from hell.
Oh, yeah. This one's relatable. You felt it right. You get anxious about something, and then you start feeling anxious about feeling anxious, which just ramps up the anxiety. Or you get angry, and then you get angry at yourself for being angry. It's this vicious cycle.
Your reaction to the feeling just makes the original feeling stronger. You're trapped. And social media definitely doesn't help. It feeds this idea that negative experiences are somehow wrong, like you're failing if you're not happy all the time.
So if wanting a positive experience is negative and accepting a negative one is positive, that's pretty counterintuitive.
Yes, that's principle 2. The desire for more positive experience is itself a negative experience. Paradoxically, the acceptance of one's negative experience is itself a positive experience. It reminds me of that Albert Camus quote, "You will never be happy if you continue to search for what happiness consists of. You will never live if you are looking for the meaning of life." I guess. It really raises the question, if trying to avoid suffering is a form of suffering, how should we even approach life then?
That's a huge question. And it brings us right to principle 3. Everything worthwhile in life is won through surmounting the associated negative experience. You can't avoid the struggle. Avoiding suffering is suffering. Pain is just woven into life. So Manson says if you stop giving a fuck about the pain, you become unstoppable. But it's crucial to understand this isn't about being indifferent. It's not about apathy. It's about consciously choosing what's worth suffering for, receiving those limited fucks for what truly matters. Friends, family, purpose. Maybe a really good burrito, he jokes. And sometimes a lawsuit.
Right. It's about finding a worthy struggle. It's about prioritization, not indifference.
Exactly. So this first section really sets the stage. Embrace who you are, accept that negative stuff happens, and choose your battles wisely. Choose what you give a fuck about. Okay, let's move on. This idea that suffering is fundamental. Manson uses another classic story to illustrate it. The Buddha. You know, a legend, right? Prince Siddhartha lives this incredibly sheltered, pampered life, never sees hardship. Then one night, he sneaks out of the palace, sees sickness, old age, death, suffering, and it completely shakes him. He runs off, abandons everything, becomes a mendicant, starves himself, tortures himself, trying to find answers through suffering.
But that doesn't work either, right? He eventually realizes that suffering just for the sake of suffering is also, well, meaningless.
Precisely. So he cleans himself up, sits under a tree for, 49 days, and that's when he has these profound realizations about the nature of life and suffering.
And that leads us to principle 4, which is basically the Buddha's core teaching. Life itself is a form of suffering. Pain, loss, disappointment, they're inevitable. Trying to resist them is futile. Peace comes from letting go of that resistance. It really challenges that common idea we have, if I just achieve X, then I'll finally be happy. That sort of algorithmic approach.
Yeah, it blows that up. And to really hammer home this point about unavoidable truths, Manson introduces maybe my favorite character in the book, Disappointment Panda. Just picture this. A panda wearing a cheesy eye mask, a t-shirt that's way too small for his belly, and his superpower, telling people harsh truths they don't want to hear. He goes door to door like a salesman.
The hero nobody wants, but everybody needs.
Totally. He'd say things like, sure, making a lot of money feels good, but it won't make your kids love you. Or, happiness is a problem you enjoy solving, not a lack of problems, just dropping truth bombs.
And that panda illustrates principle 5. Suffering is biologically useful. It's nature's preferred agent for inspiring change. Think about it evolutionarily. We're wired to be a bit dissatisfied. That dissatisfaction drives us to innovate, to survive, to improve things.
Right, like stubbing your toe. That pain isn't fun, but it teaches you, hey, don't walk into the table leg. It's a feedback mechanism. Psychological pain works the same way, he argues. It signals something's wrong, teaches us to avoid certain mistakes, helps us grow. The danger comes when we try to insulate ourselves from all discomfort, when we coddle ourselves too much. We lose those benefits.
Which brings up a really interesting point Manson makes about problems. Principle 6. Problems never stop. They merely get exchanged or upgraded. He uses that great line. Warren Buffett's got money problems. The drunk hobo down at Quickie Mart's got money problems. Buffett's just got better money problems than the hobo.
That's brilliant. It perfectly captures it. Problems are constant. So if problems are always there, where does happiness come from? And this is principle 7. Happiness comes from solving problems. It's not about having a life without problems. It's about finding problems you actually enjoy having and enjoy solving. Happiness is an action, a constant work in progress.
And he points out the two main ways people mess this up. First, denial. Trying to pretend problems don't exist, distracting yourself. It feels good short-term, maybe, but leads to insecurity. Second, victim mentality, blaming everyone else, feeling powerless.
Yeah.
That just leads to anger and helplessness.
Yeah, he calls them easy highs, but they don't last. He also warns against relying too much on emotions. They're just feedback signals, right? Not commands. Just because something feels good doesn't mean it is good. Just because something feels bad doesn't mean it is bad. Otherwise, you end up on the hedonic treadmill, always chasing the next good feeling, but never really getting anywhere different because the underlying problems are still there.
All right, so to recap this section, suffering is inevitable and actually useful. Problems never go away, they just change. And real happiness, it comes from actively engaging with and solving the problems you choose.
Okay, so if problems are constant, happiness is about solving them, emotions are just signals, then the big question becomes, what do you really want? What struggle are you willing to embrace?
And this leads straight into principle 8. Happiness requires struggle. It grows from problems. Real, deep fulfillment isn't handed to you. It's earned by choosing your struggles and managing them. Embracing the negative stuff, it really pushes against that fantasy of effortless joy, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Manson uses his own experience here. He talks about how he used to fantasize about being a rock star. He could picture it perfectly, the stage, the crowd screaming, all of it. But it never happened. And why? He's brutally honest. I was in love with the result, but I wasn't in love with the process, he admits. I hardly tried at all. He wanted the payoff without the pain, the struggle.
That's such a relatable point. And it connects directly to principle 9. Who you are is defined by what you're willing to struggle for. It's not just about reaching the summit. The joy, the definition of self, is found in enjoying the climb itself. Which makes you ask, What does this mean for our society's obsession with everyone needing to be special or exceptional?
Oh yeah, he tackles that head on.
Mm.
He introduces this character, Jimmy, maybe you know someone like this, the guy who's always talking big, name-dropping, hyping his next venture,
Mhm.
but never actually does anything. All talk, no walk, usually living off someone else, maybe perpetually stoned, convinced he's brilliant, and anyone who doubts him is just a hater.
Delusional self-confidence, basically.
Totally. And Manson links this kind of character partly to the self-esteem movement that started back in the 60s and 70s. You know, great inflation, participation trophies for everyone. The intention might have been good, but he argues it inadvertently created generations who felt entitled to feel good about themselves without necessarily having earned it through effort or overcoming adversity.
Right. And that's principle 10. Merely feeling good about yourself means nothing without a solid reason. Feeling good should be a result of doing good things, of facing challenges. Adversity and failure aren't just side effects. They're necessary for developing strong, resilient adults. Manson argues that the real measure of self-worth isn't how you feel about your successes, but how people feel about the negative aspects of themselves. Jimmy couldn't face his flaws, and that made him weak.
This idea of entitlement, it's central here, believing you deserve good things without putting in the work.
Exactly. It creates this protective bubble, this narcissistic bubble, he calls it, where you can't see reality clearly.
And Manson owns his own past entitlement, too. He talks about his adolescence, getting caught with weed, kicked out of school, parents divorcing, kind of traumatic shit, as he puts it. He realized later that this led him to feel entitled in relationships, always chasing women for validation, needing them to fix his problems. And he points out that entitlement has two faces. It can be, I'm awesome, you all suck, so I deserve special treatment. Or it can be, I suck, you're all awesome, so I deserve special treatment.
Both stem from the same self-absorbed core, focusing only on the self.
Right. It's not about the world, it's about me.
And this leads to a really liberating idea, Principle 11. There is no such thing as a truly personal problem. Chances are millions have faced the same struggles. Realizing you're not uniquely special or uniquely flawed is often the first step to actually solving your problems. He calls out the tyranny of exceptionalism that's amplified by the internet and social media. We're bombarded with the highlights of everyone else's lives, the extraordinary stuff.
Which makes us feel inadequate.
Exactly. And we try to compensate either by becoming entitled ourselves, I deserve better, or by falling into addictions or distractions.
So this whole idea of being special, he really wants to dismantle it.
Completely. Which brings us to Principle 12. You are not special, and that's okay. Actually, it's better than okay. It's liberating. True greatness, he argues, comes from being obsessed with improvement, from believing you are not already great but can always get better. It's the antidote to entitlement. Accepting the bland and mundane truths of life, like most of your life is probably pretty average, and that's fine, is like eating your vegetables.
Haha, the vegetable course for emotional health. I like that. Okay, to illustrate the importance of why you suffer, he tells the incredible story of Hiroo Onoda, Japanese soldier sent to the Philippines in 1944. Orders, never surrender, fight to the end. World War II ends in 45, they drop leaflets, his comrades surrender or die. But Onoda, he thinks it's enemy propaganda, so he keeps fighting for nearly 30 years, hiding in the jungle, living off the land, sometimes killing civilians he thought were enemies.
30 years, that's unbelievable.
Right, until 1974, this young Japanese hippie adventurer, Norio Suzuki, goes looking for him. Apparently, Suzuki told people he wanted to find Lieutenant Onoda, a panda bear, and the abominable snowman in that order. And he finds him, convinces him the war is over. Onoda finally surrenders. But the tragic irony, he goes back to Japan, finds it totally changed, vacuous, materialistic. The Japan he sacrificed 30 years for didn't exist anymore. His suffering, his loyalty felt meaningless. He became deeply depressed.
Wow, what a powerful story.
Yeah.
It perfectly sets up Principle 13. If suffering is inevitable, the question isn't how do I stop suffering, but why am I suffering for what purpose?
Yeah.
We have to choose our suffering. Onoda chose loyalty to a dead empire. Suzuki chose adventure. Their suffering had meaning for them based on their values.
That distinction is key, and he contrasts Onoda with Dave Mustaine from Megadeth. Mustaine was kicked out of Metallica early on, formed Megadeth, sold millions of albums, but apparently always felt like a failure because he measured himself against Metallica's even bigger success. His value was be bigger than Metallica.
Always comparing, always falling short in his own mind.
Exactly. Compare that to Pete Best, the original Beatles drummer, fired right before they blew up, devastated, depressed, even suicidal at one point. But years later, he said he was happier than he ever would have been. Why? Because getting fired led him to meet his wife, have a family he loved. His values shifted. What he measured as success changed.
Which brings us to principle 14. To change how you see your problems, you must change what you value and how you measure failure success. This is huge. Self-improvement isn't just about habits, it's about values. Manson distinguishes between good, healthy values, things that are reality-based, constructive, controllable, like honesty, creativity, humility, and bad, unhealthy values. Bad values are often superstitious, destructive, or outside your control, like being popular, needing to feel good all the time, being rich just for the sake of it, pleasing everyone.
So it's about choosing better things to care about.
Precisely. Self-improvement is really about prioritizing better values. Because, as Manson puts it so well, when you give better fucks, you get better problems. And when you get better problems, you get a better life.
Okay, let's recap this section's principles. We had happiness requires struggle. 8. Who you are is defined by your struggles. 9. Feeling good needs a reason. Adversity builds strength. 10. You're not alone in your problems. 11. You're not special, and that's freeing. 12. Choose why you suffer. 13.
Awesome.
And changing values changes problems. 14. Phew, lots there. All right, moving on. This next part focuses on something really powerful. Responsibility. Manson flips a common phrase. With great responsibility comes great power.
Yes. Principle 15. We are individually responsible for everything in our lives, no matter the external circumstances or who is technically at fault. We don't always control what happens to us, but we always control how we interpret it and how we respond. And he's quick to point out the responsibility fault fallacy. We tend to bundle these together, but they're different.
How does he explain that difference?
He uses examples. Like, if someone leaves a baby on your doorstep, it's not your fault the baby is there. But it's absolutely your responsibility now to decide what to do. Call the police, take it in, whatever the choice, the response is yours. Or think of a judge in a courtroom. The judge isn't at fault for the crime committed, but they are responsible for delivering justice, for the consequences. So, fault is past tense. Responsibility is present tense. Fault is about blame for what happened. Responsibility is about ownership of your response now.
That's a really clear distinction. It's tough, though. Manson shares his own story about his first girlfriend cheating on him, his first reaction. Total blame. She ruined everything. She caused his misery. Standard stuff. But then he had this shift. He realized, okay, she was at fault for cheating, but he was responsible for his own happiness. He couldn't control her, but he could control his reaction, his life. So he started working on himself, exercising, reconnecting with friends, traveling, and slowly he started feeling better.
And the key part is what happened later.
Right. Yeah. About a year later, looking back with more perspective, he realized he hadn't been totally blameless in the relationship's dynamic. He saw his own contributions to the problems, his own needy behaviors. He wasn't just the innocent victim.
And that's principle 16. Taking responsibility for our problems is where the real learning and life improvement happens. Blaming others only hurts ourselves in the long run. It makes you ask, though, how far does this go? Does this apply even in the face of horrific tragedy?
He addresses that directly. He brings up Malala Yousafzai's shot by the Taliban for advocating girls' education. She didn't choose to be shot, that wasn't her fault, but she chose her response to continue her advocacy, becoming an even more powerful voice, winning the Nobel Peace Prize. She took responsibility for her mission, despite the horrific event. He also mentions dealing with an angry online commenter whose son had died, who accused Manson of not knowing true pain. Instead of getting defensive, Manson chose to practice patience and empathy, taking responsibility for his own reaction, applying his own advice. And think about those OCD teenagers he profiles, Imogen, Josh, Jack. They didn't choose their genetic conditions, but they learned they could choose how to live with them, how to manage the pain. Jack put it perfectly. I didn't choose this life, but I get to choose how to live with it. I have to choose how to live with it.
It's like the poker analogy he uses. We don't choose the hand we're dealt. Some hands are awful.
No.
But the game is about the choices we make with those cards.
Exactly. Nobody gets through life without scars.
And this relates to something he calls victimhood chic, which feels very relevant today. It's that tendency, especially online, to gain attention or even moral righteousness by emphasizing how one has been wronged, by publicly blaming others. It becomes a way to avoid responsibility.
Yeah, he talks about outrage porn in the media too, how getting outraged can feel good, righteous even, but often distracts from solving actual problems.
Which leads to principle 17. We need to pick our battles wisely. Don't get caught up in every outrage. Try to empathize, even with those you disagree with. Prioritize honesty and transparency over just being right or getting revenge.
So taking responsibility is key. But sometimes, even when you want to, you feel stuck. You hit those how do I questions, like how do I break up with them, or how do I ask my boss for a raise, or how do I start exercising? The pain or fear makes the simple seem impossible.
Manson admits he struggled with this with social anxiety. Just how do you walk up and talk to a person? Felt impossibly complex because the feeling of fear was so strong.
He failed to separate the feeling from the reality. Right, he felt like people wouldn't want to talk, so he believed they wouldn't.
And the antidote he proposes is pretty radical, and it's Principle 21. Learn to sustain the pain you've chosen. When you choose a value, you choose its associated pain. Welcome it, then act despite it. Don't wait for the fear to go away, act anyway. This connects to his do something principle. This is brilliant. Action isn't just the effect of motivation, it's also the cause of it.
Wait, say that again? Action is the cause of motivation.
Yeah. We usually think we need to feel motivated before we act. But Manson flips it. Sometimes you just need to do something, anything, even small. And the act itself creates inspiration, which then builds motivation. Action, inspiration by motivation. He gives the example of a novelist friend who committed to writing just 200 crappy words per day. The act of writing, even badly, got the wheels turning and often led to more.
I love that. Just start. Which leads to Principle 22. When the standard for success becomes merely acting any action as progress, then failure feels less important. It just becomes part of the process that moves you forward. You essentially become your own source of motivation by just doing the thing. But he also warns about being too certain about things. How our brains are meaning machines that can latch on to beliefs even if they're wrong. He mentions that journalist, Meredith Moran.
Oh, the false memory case. Yeah, that's a sobering example of how easily our minds can construct narratives, even about traumatic events. If it helps make sense of our feelings or experiences, it highlights the danger of absolute certainty.
Exactly, which is why Principle 18 is crucial. Uncertainty is the root of all progress and growth. We have to be willing to doubt our own beliefs, our current values, if we want to learn and evolve.
As the saying goes, the man who believes he knows everything learns nothing. Manson suggests actively cultivating uncertainty by asking yourself a few key questions. First, what if I'm wrong? Really entertain the possibility. Second, what would it mean if I were wrong? Explore the implications, even if they're uncomfortable. Like Aristotle said, be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. And third, the litmus test. Would being wrong create a better or a worse problem than my current one for myself and others? That helps you gauge if your belief is actually serving you well. He adds a great line. If it's you versus the world, chances are it's really just you versus yourself.
Powerful stuff. Okay, quick recap for this section. Take responsibility for your responses. 15. Responsibility, not fault, drives growth. 16. Choose battles wisely, prioritize honesty. 17. Learn to act despite pain. 21. Action creates motivation. Just doing something is success. 22. And embrace uncertainty as the root of growth. 18.
Okay, let's unpack this next section. It starts with the author reflecting on his years as a digital nomad. 5 years, 55 countries. Sounds amazing, right? Absolute freedom.
Yeah.
But he realized it felt, well, so profound yet so meaningless at the same time.
Yeah, and that experience leads him to Principle 23. Absolute freedom by itself means nothing. Having endless options can actually be paralyzing. Real meaning, he argues, often comes from rejecting alternatives, from choosing to commit deeply to one thing, a place, a person, a belief, a project. It's related to that paradox of choice idea. More choices doesn't always equal more happiness. He illustrates this with a surprising story about being in St. Petersburg, Russia. He says the conditions were pretty rough, bad food, bad weather, inefficiency everywhere. But he loved it there. Why? Because of the culture's blunt honesty. No fake politeness, no salesmanship. People were direct, sometimes brutally so. If they didn't like you, you knew it. And he found this incredibly liberation through accepting rejection, he calls it.
He contrasts this with Western culture's emphasis on appearances, on being agreeable, on selling yourself. His Russian teacher had a theory that under communism, where money was less important, trust became the real currency. You had to know who you could really rely on.
That's fascinating. And it ties into Principle 24. We need to reject something. Otherwise, we stand for nothing.
If you try to accept everything, please everyone, avoid all rejection, you end up directionless. It's a subtle form of entitlement, feeling like you shouldn't have to make hard choices or face negative consequences. To truly value X, you must reject non-X. Our identity is shaped as much by what we say no to as what we say yes to.
That makes sense. He then shifts to relationships, using Romeo and Juliet as kind of a cautionary tale about batshit crazy love.
Yeah. Not exactly a model for healthy relationships.
Right. He contrasts that infatuation with what healthy love actually looks like.
And this is principle 25. Healthy love is based on two individuals solving their own problems with mutual support, but crucially with clear boundaries. Unhealthy love, or codependency, is when two people try to escape their problems through each other, using the relationship to avoid dealing with their own stuff. He gives examples of poor boundaries. Things like, you can't go out without me, you know how jealous I get, or blaming your partner for your feelings, you made me feel stupid.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. He talks about the victim and saver dynamic too.
Right. One person constantly creates problems or feels helpless, the victim, and the other feels compelled to fix them, the saver. Both roles actually feed entitlement and prevent real intimacy or growth. And it raises a key question. If people avoid conflict and tough conversations to maintain this dynamic, how can they ever build real trust?
So how is trust built, according to Manson?
Through conflict. Principle 26. Without conflict, there can be no real trust. Conflict isn't necessarily fighting. It's the willingness to have difficult conversations, to disagree, to say and hear no. Both partners need to feel safe enough to refuse things, to maintain their boundaries without the relationship collapsing. He also touches on cheating, saying the core issue isn't usually the sex itself, but the catastrophic breach of trust. Repairing that requires the cheater to own the values that led to the breach and demonstrate consistently changed behavior over time. Trust is fragile, like that china plate analogy he uses. Break it once, maybe you can mend it, break it again. It shatters into too many pieces.
Wow. So it circles back to commitment again.
Exactly. Principle 27. There is freedom and liberation in commitment. It sounds paradoxical, but choosing one path, one person, one value, and rejecting the alternatives actually simplifies things. It frees up mental energy, allows you to go deep instead of staying shallow. As he says, death is where the gold is buried. You find the real value by committing and digging in.
Okay, let's quickly recap Section V. Absolute freedom is meaningless without commitment. 23. We must reject things to stand for something. Healthy love involves boundaries and solving your own problems. 25. Trust requires conflict and the ability to say here, no. 26. And commitment brings freedom and depth. 27. All right, we're heading into the final stretch, and this is where things get really deep. We're confronting mortality. Manson starts with a really raw, personal story about losing his close friend Josh. They were 19 at a party. Josh was drunk and high, went cliff diving, and drowned. He remembers their last conversation asking Josh where he'd be later. Josh's ironic reply, "Seek the truth for yourself and I will meet you there." Haunting. Finding out Josh died sent Manson into a deep depression, a feeling of profound meaninglessness. But eventually, that experience became transformative.
It became, as he puts it, the clearest before-after point in his life. Josh's death, paradoxically, freed him to live more fully. And this leads to principle 28. In the face of our inevitable death, there is simply no good reason to give in to fear, embarrassment, or shame over trivial things. Avoiding pain, avoiding difficulty, avoiding vulnerability. Ultimately, it's avoiding being fully alive. Confronting death puts everything else in perspective.
Yeah. And that leads to principle 29. Death is the light by which the shadow of all life's meaning is measured. Without the endpoint of death, nothing would really matter. There'd be no agency, no scarcity. He brings in Ernest Becker's work here, specifically the denial of death. Becker had two main points, right?
First, humans are unique because we can conceptualize our own death, which creates this underlying anxiety, what Becker called death terror. Second, to cope with this terror, we create what Becker called immortality projects, ways we try to make our conceptual self, our identity, our legacy live on after our physical body dies.
And like putting your name on a building, having kids, creating art, seeking fame.
Exactly. We're trying to deny death by achieving symbolic immortality. But Becker's final, crucial insight, the bitter antidote, as Manson calls it, was that these immortality projects are often the problem, not the solution. They distract us, make us chase the wrong things. So principle 30. We should question our conceptual self and become more comfortable with the reality of our own death. Accepting our finitude actually frees us to choose values that are more authentic, less driven by this desperate need to live forever symbolically.
Wow. He describes this visceral experience sitting right on the edge of a cliff at the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa, inches from death. He felt intense fear, of course, but also this incredible clarity, this exhilaration, the sense of being totally present. Nothing makes you present and mindful like being mere inches away from your own death, he writes.
Confronting it head on. And that experience reinforces the final core idea, principle 31. The acceptance of one's own death and fragility makes everything else easier. It helps untangle addictions, confront entitlement, accept responsibility, suffer through fears, embrace failure, handle rejection. Because compared to death, most other problems seem smaller, more manageable. As Manson says, the more I peer into the darkness, the brighter life gets.
So when you pull it all together, what's the ultimate message? Manson seems to be pushing back hard against a kind of modern coddling, this sense of deserving things without earning them, confusing fame with meaning.
I think the final powerful takeaway is Principle 32. You are already great. Not because of achievements or external validation, but simply because in the face of endless confusion and certain death, you continue to choose what to give a fuck about and what not to. That act of choosing your values, of opting for meaning in an indifferent universe, that itself makes you beautiful, successful, loved in a fundamental way.
Yeah.
He brings back Bukowski for one last perfect quote. We're all gonna die. All of us. What is circus? That alone should make us love each other, but it doesn't. We are terrorized and flattened by life's trivialities. We are eaten up by nothing.
Damn. That hits hard. Eaten up by nothing.
Yeah. And Manson's final thought, reflecting on Josh's death and his own journey, is simply, there's nothing to be afraid of. Ever.
What a powerful place to end. Okay, let's do a quick lightning round recap of all the principles we covered. Ready?
That's good.
1. Success can come from accepting failure and being authentic.
2. Wanting positive is negative. Accepting negative is positive.
3. Everything worthwhile requires overcoming negativity. Choose your fucks.
4. Life is suffering. Stop resisting the inevitable.
5. Suffering is biologically useful for change.
6. Problems never stop, they just upgrade.
7. Happiness is solving problems you enjoy solving.
8. Happiness requires struggle.
9. You are defined by what you'll struggle for. Enjoy the climb.
10. Feeling good needs a reason. Adversity builds strength.
11. Your problems aren't unique. Realizing that helps solve them.
12. You're not special, and that's okay. Focus on improvement.
13. Ask why you're suffering, choose a purpose.
14. Change your values metrics to change your problems. Give better.
15. You're responsible for your responses regardless of fault.
16. Responsibility, not blame, leads to growth.
17. Pick battles wisely. Prioritize honesty and doubt.
18. Uncertainty is the root of all growth.
Taking a breath. Wow, okay, keep going.
21. Learn to sustain chosen pain. Act despite fear.
Yep.
Skip 19 and 20 implicitly covered elsewhere in outline.
22. Make acting the success metric. Failure becomes unimportant. Action causes motivation.
23. Absolute freedom is meaningless. Meaning comes from commitment rejection.
24. Reject something to stand for something. Define yourself by rejection, too.
25. Healthy love equals boundaries plus solving own problems plus support.
26. Trust requires conflict and the ability to say here no.
27. Commitment brings freedom and depth. 28. Facing death frees you from fear, shame. Don't avoid life.
29. Death gives life meaning.
30. Question immortality project. Embrace mortality to choose values freely.
31. Accepting death makes everything easier.
32. You are already great because you choose your values despite mortality.
Phew. 32 principles. Quite a framework for, well, not giving a fuck about the wrong things. So here's your provocative thought to take away from this deep dive. What is one unimportant thing, maybe something society tells you should matter, that you can consciously choose to stop giving a fuck about starting today? What truly important thing could take its place? Think about it. Thanks so much for joining us on this exploration.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Hopefully this gives you some useful tools to think about what you truly value and where you want to focus your energy. See you next time.
That's it from us today. This is Lisa and Jim signing off from Pod Talk. Hope you all have an informative session. Please like and subscribe for more such sessions. We hope to see you soon with a brand new topic of discussion.